first thing we have to notice that there, in addition to this docket, we have another docket that involves New England Power, which does business also as National Grid, and Invenergy have the transmission concern in order to operate the plant. The plant has to have electricity, and the idea has always been that it would connect with the transmission line, which is essentially there, very close by. From the December 1st letter, we know that Invenergy has been dealing with New England Power Company, or National Grid, with ISO regarding the interconnection and the interconnection fee under ISO New England's tariff. So what's referred to as the large generator interconnection agreement. Apparently, there have been difficulties with the negotiations, and Invenergy has taken the position that the current tariff regarding the interconnection particular costs that are at issue here have been the responsibility of the interconnecting generating facility, and Invenergy was taking the position that the generator should not have to be responsible for those costs, that the costs should be socialized. And in this case, I believe that means it would be socialized throughout the area that ISO New England controls. ISO New England, the independent system operator for the New England grid. Those negotiations apparently, as we know from the letter, unsuccessful, and Invenergy has essentially sued ISO New England and National Grid, but for FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, regarding those costs, whether or not they should be socialized, or that Invenergy should be responsible for them as the connecting generation facility. That the obvious result, if Invenergy were to prevail, of course, is that this proposed merchant generation plant cannot claim that it wouldn't place any costs on ratepayers, because that would mean that ratepayers in New England would be responsible for those aspects of the transmission costs. So that's essentially the issue here. Without knowing the result of that action at FERC, we don't know. We can't evaluate the cost of the facility, because that's a cost that has heretofore not been contemplated as involved with the facility. So that makes a change that I think we need to consider.
I agree. In preparing for this, I was looking at some of the pre-filed testimony, and I think we all remember that, and I don't know how much we want to get into it now, because I think we should have a show cause hearing. So I don't know how much you wanted to, but, it's been stated over and over by Mr. Nyland and the attorneys representing Invenergy that this is I'm reading from his pre-filed testimony, this is a privately financed project without seeking any ratepayer funding. So I would observe that there's several venues where things are happening. We have the separate docket, but as has been stated many times, you don't build a power plant without a transmission line. So they're related. There was kind of a but-for term used in some of the FERC filings. So I think it is a change, which there was a letter from the town and CLF which talked about the PUC advisory opinion, because one of the critical elements in I think it's section 11 of our act is obviously the costs and the need. And I think some of the things that we've been presented with at times, I think quite a bit after maybe they've been in the works, would raise new questions about cost and whether it's entirely privately financed and about need. So I'm concerned about that in regard to some of these key findings that we need to make. So I think we need more, I think we need to consider whether those, like the FERC decision, which I believe it was stated would be within 60 days, or perhaps that was wishful thinking, but I know that was in one of the filings, whether we should suspend these hearings to find out the answer to that, because as you stated, that raises it really speaks to a fundamental part of the application.
I just want to say that it is very important that all the issues should be resolved before we start the final hearings. So the issue of the ratepayers' cost, the issue of the water supply plan should all be resolved, and we should be very transparent before we start the final hearing. So having a show cause hearing will be a way to go.
All right, then I would move to conduct a show cause hearing to determine first whether the contingent water supply plan with the Narragansett Indian Tribe as submitted contains sufficient detail for the board to fully evaluate, and or whether the contingent water supply plan with the Narragansett Indian Tribe should be dismissed from the pending application, and two, whether the application as submitted under Energy Facilities Siting Board Rule 1.5 and 1.6 would be sufficiently changed as to the impact on ratepayers so as to require suspension if Invenergy's complaint pending before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is successful.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I believe we could schedule we have a hearing date presently scheduled, although nothing to do. But perhaps this, on the 18th of December.
Yeah, just looking at our rules, which is 1.15 of our rules, a show cause hearing shall be scheduled not later than 10 days and not sooner than 48 hours after the issuance of a show cause order. So we're having that discussion now, and a lot hangs on when we issue the order, which generally we try to turn around quickly. But we have that date of the 18th, which is less than a week from today, which would be, work for us for certain. But would we need witnesses, or I guess I'd observe to the party that some of that, and in regard to the water supply plan and some of the sensitivity, I'm not quite sure how we'll handle answering the questions unless the applicant is willing to have more disclosed on the record. But I think, it may be necessary to have witnesses to get at some of these questions, and I'm certainly aware that it may be hard for people to travel within a week. So I think the timing's a bit tricky with the holidays. I'd certainly be prepared to do it on Monday the 18th if the parties and any witnesses they need could make that happen.
Either the coordinator or council, do we need to set the date for it?
We do have to set a date for
And is the 18th an appropriate date for it? Or is it not within the allowable time frame?
Do you think we should speak with the applicants also, whether they have enough time to prepare for this request?
it. The 18th would be a day if the parties want it. If the applicant needed additional time, they can certainly ask for additional time if they need that. And the matter can be scheduled. However, if they don't, then the board has to have the hearing within 2 weeks.
Yes, and in terms of the other questions that you raised, I think all of those should be addressed by the parties. So,
Wait, Madam Chair, I'm not sure I understood that. Are you saying when you say they should be addressed by the parties, was I suggesting something different? What did you mean by that?
no, confused. Deciding whether or not it's necessary to require testimony, whether or not the applicant has sufficient time to prepare it, by that could be addressed in responding to the motion that we just passed and that we are.
So I would suggest that since we have the 18th, that we get an order out within 24 hours. And then the 18th is more than 2 days and less than 10 days from the time of our order. If we find there's compelling reasons that we can't do that, we could cancel that date and reschedule.
The applicant can file a motion for an extension of time if they need an extension of time.
Okay, very good. That was just that if any of the parties require additional time, that is, that they don't think that they can be prepared to go forward on the 18th of this month, that they can file motions for an